Hello and welcome into another edition of the Arizona State Sun Devils Insider Podcast. My name is Kevin Hicks and I'm your lead beat writer for the Arizona State Sun Devils on SI and your host of the daily Sun Devils Insider Podcast. And I'm so grateful to be joining you on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. We are officially into the home stretch of Arizona State spring football. Um, Only three practices remain and um, they will be tomorrow morning, Saturday evening in all likelihood, and on Tuesday morning, next Tuesday. And it's been an honor to be covering this team all spring and since last summer. And there's been a lot of things that have really impressed me and a lot of things that still need to be answered for the football program, but just wanted to talk about that at the front end of today's show. That leads me into the main topic on today's episode, which is once again diving into transfer portal developments surrounding Arizona State. So, um, I think that I'm going to take the angle of how significant recent developments have been or will be for the program if they end up coming true. The ramifications and everything, all those bases will be covered. Um, I think we have to start out with Paulius Morauskas. I feel like everybody assumed that Morauskas would follow Coach Bennett to ASU when the hiring happened because he entered his name in the portal very shortly after. Um, Top 10 player in the portal, one of the best players in the West Coast Conference last season, and would be an amazing foundational piece for the Sun Devils. Um, there was a little bit of pause last week because the assumption became that Louisville would be able to come in and scoop him away from ASU. The Cardinals are obviously going all in on building out a roster that can compete for a national title this year. But I started getting wind at a point yesterday afternoon, on Tuesday afternoon, that the Sun Devils were in fact in the lead for Morauskas, and there was a good chance they would beat out Kentucky, UConn, and Louisville for his services. That hasn't officially been announced yet. He hasn't announced his commitment, but things are looking good for Randy Bennett, and uh, I think that based off of this, it kind of puts the speculation that they had a frosty relationship to the side. And it's very significant for ASU. I mean, in two different ways. In one way, it shows that Randy Bennett's players, even though he can be a hardline coach and he's consistent with the way he approaches discipline, approaches his players, that his players have a deep admiration, respect for him. And even if Barauskas is the only St. Mary's player to follow him to ASU, that's a pretty big foundational piece, and that shows that he definitely has some gravitas in the college basketball world still. Um, the second one is that ASU might be establishing themselves as a program that can compete to land some of these elite transfer portal players. I mean, it's one thing to add a former player of Bennett's to his roster and beating out blue bloods and blue blood adjacents for him. That is not necessarily a statement that they're here to stay in that department, but it does show that they are willing to be competitive in the NIL landscape. It shows that Bennett is determined to not only have construct a roster that is well fitting, but also one that has a lot of high end talent. Maybe not even ways that he could obtain at St. Mary's. And I think that that is should be so encouraging to fans of Arizona State. I think even if you lose Masamba Diop, that you're looking at a roster that will be competitive in an extremely strenuous Big 12 schedule in 2026-27. And I think that Randy Bennett is really flipping the script of the early part of his tenure with this. And that leads me into the other players that Arizona State is heavily targeting. I caught wind to Joel Foxwell being a very prioritized target just essentially right after he entered the portal. And now he's officially visiting ASU on Saturday over the weekend. I think that he makes so much sense as an Arizona State player. Obviously, Mo Odom is done at ASU. His one season was very successful. He was one of the best Sun Devils in recent memory. But Joel Foxwell has the tools to be a worthy successor. He is a little smaller than Mo, but you get 3 years of eligibility with him. You have the Australian connection built in with him and Coach David Patrick and even Bennett, Coach Bennett. Uh, he is phenomenal in the pick and roll game as an initiator of an offense. He already has high-end scoring chops, as we saw from his near 30-point performance against Gonzaga uh, in the midst of Portland's season in 2025-26. There are areas of his game that might you might look at and say it needs to improve, like his three-point consistency. He shot about 32% last year from three. But there are so many things about his game that jump off the page and you could easily see translating to the Big 12. And he would absolutely be that tray holder sort of player that really changes fortunes for a coach that comes in and needs to build up credibility, uh, to keep momentum going and everything in between. So I think that Joel Foxwell would be a very, very significant addition, especially since some players that I anticipated being targets are already off the board. Christian Hammond went to NC State. Um, uh, Finley Bizjack went to West Virginia. My bad, I had to think about that for a second. He went to a conference rival in West Virginia. Uh, Justin Pippen went to Ohio State. So that leaves your options a little bit more bare than before, but Foxwell will be an excellent addition to the team. And lastly, one that's been a little more under the radar, Trayvon Leonhardt, all West Coast Conference at Utah Valley. He averaged 12 points per game and 6 assists per game, which led the conference. He shot just around 37% from three, and he's a combo guard. And I know that this has been stressed by me a lot over the last few weeks, but I cannot overstate the necessity that Arizona State has to address the guard position in that way. They need to find a Noah Mayusin adjacent player. They need to find a player that can play the one and the two. They need to find a player that can guard multiple positions. They need to find a player that has uh, makings of a three-point shot. Mayusin wasn't always there as a three-point shooter, but he had his moments, and they need that really badly. If you can combine Joel Foxwell with Leonhardt, that really could be a dynamic duo out of backcourt, maybe the best playmaking backcourt that we've seen at Arizona State collectively since might be James Harden and Derek Glasser. It might be going that far back. But all in all, each of these targets are very, very meaningful to the upcoming team in 2026, 27, and beyond. I think that Randy Bennett is setting the foundation for a Sun Devil program that will consistently compete in the Big 12. And I think that Arizona State fans will be pleased with the final product that we get, at least as far as how the roster looks on paper. And that's really all I have for today. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into another edition of the Arizona State Sun Devils Insider Podcast. And stay tuned over the next few days for Arizona State spring practice content, for transfer portal content, and next week for NFL draft coverage as Jordan Tyson, Keyshawn Elliott, Keith Abney II, and others look to live out their NFL dreams finally to see them get fulfilled. Um, Once again, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will see you with another episode tomorrow.